with a special placard from the government, but you can just leave at any moment. That's ridiculous.
Yes.
And these are bad things. However, all these guys that are watching these anti-women channel, like, I try not to be a dick to people who want to figure out how to better their lives. Like, if I see a guy going to the gym, I'm going to tell, like, and he's fat and he's overweight or whatever, and he's struggling, I'm going to be like, bro, you got this. You know what I mean? So I see these guys who are watching these channels, and part of me is just like, that's stupid. But I'm not going to hate on a guy who's actively investigating. They may not understand completely, but they're like, why is this thing happening? But I'll just put it this way. Part of what we're seeing, it's actually good. You know why? Weak men will fail, and they deserve to fail. And I will mock their failure.
Well, what about Acolyte? Star Wars sucks. I mean, this does...
I'll watch it. And where are the strong men to lift the burdens and the heavy rocks to make good stuff? So here's what I'm saying. You got a bunch of guys that are sitting online, overweight, and again, I'm not making fun of everybody's overweight, saying everybody's overweight is a failure. I'm saying you've got guys who are not trying to better themselves, who are not trying to exercise, who are not cleaning the Cheetos off their mustache, who aren't... that's right, I'm looking at you, Alex. They're not wiping their armpits.
You know that I do eat a lot of Cheetos and stuff, yeah. Tim knows that. That is
what we're seeing right now is... For one, we can go back 100 years, 200 years and talk about suffrage, and it was weak men across the board who kept bending the knee and could not maintain social order. They just gave up. But I look at today and I'm like, well, look, it's interesting.
He's talking about us?
Maybe what's happening needs to happen. This is natural selection.
Yeah.
A society has emerged because men became weaker and weaker. They could not provide for what women wanted, and they could not provide stability in social order. And now you have these fractured systems where young men sit around complaining on the internet, removing themselves from the dating pool, complaining they can't get in. Meanwhile, I know dudes who are swimming in women, and they're short, and they're wealthy. Because these guys are like, here are the cards I'm holding in my hand. I am going to figure out how to maximize my capabilities with this. If, you look at a lot of these channels like to highlight these dating apps where women, they only want the top 20th percentile of attractive men, and so that means 80% of men are just out of the dating pool. And I look at that and I'm like, sucks for you, I guess, dude. I don't know how many times you got to read Jordan Peterson's book to figure out you don't just get to exist and get a woman.
So Rach is absolutely correct to say that the red pill movement, or the manosphere, whatever you'd like to call it, is a reaction to the femme-centric conditioning of our modern culture and the demonization of masculinity and the mass propagandization of women. However, I think that Tim's perspective on this, whilst understandable, is just wrong. And maybe I'll reach out to his team and see if he wants to do a culture war.
Is there a way for you to increase your mic volume? It can't. What the fuck?
Episode about this, because I'd like to address it. Having become, of course, a foremost internet dating expert that I never intended to be.
So you're saying that you would like a gentlemanly man, somebody who courts you, takes you on a date, all of these sorts of things?
Absolutely.
I'm a little bit in two minds here, because I can hear what you're saying, but then I can see that you're dressed as a cat.
I'm a dog, so...
And you call yourself a dog.
Woof, yes.
Do you think
Nick, could you
that
open
could
that
be
door more?
perhaps hindering that a little bit, the fact that you are
So
a
I
dog?
don't deserve respect because I'm dressing like an animal?
Well,
I don't deserve to be treated like a person because I'm dressing like an animal?
I was say, Do you think that that might be a deterrent for a man who is more traditional if you're dressing like a dog?
No.
So, firstly, it's always a red flag when a guy opens up the conversation about the red pill or about male spaces with, I was talking to my girlfriend about this and...
I was talking to my girlfriend about this.
And his point about men being wealthy, yeah, okay. Women like men with resources. That's always been the case. It's not revolutionary. But most guys out there aren't wealthy. Most guys out there work a regular job and have a regular salary. And the cost of living happens to be really high at the moment. So what do we do with these guys? Are they all losers who deserve to fail and go through life without a woman? No, actually, they're very important. Matter of fact, the world can't function without them. And average earning guys are the ones who are most affected by this.
The number one thing holding you back from dating again?
As a heterosexual female, I think we could all agree that the number one reason we are not dating is men.
Moreover, from my experience, having gone on the Whatever podcast 7 times, I can pretty safely and comfortably say that this idea that Tim has, that it's all just resentful, loser incels who watch this podcast, is actually wrong. And this was surprising to me when I found out as well. It's actually a lot more complicated than that. And I used to think along the same lines as Tim about this until I got really curious about it. And just to preface before I get into this, I will acknowledge that most of this content is controversy porn, it's clickbait, and honestly that's just the way that the internet works these days. If you don't have this even in small doses and you're operating in the cultural space, then you just won't last. And that's just the harsh truth of it. But in terms of the audiences that watch these shows, it's actually not just a bunch of angry young men who hate women, as everybody paints it to be. I mean, I've been recognized more for my appearances on Whatever than anything else. And most of the time, when I'm recognized for that, or when I'm reached out to by various people, it's women. And I think it would probably surprise a lot of people to learn just how curious women are regarding these podcasts and how much they watch it. You see, the current dating market, since the advent of social media, is completely screwed, and it's only getting worse. And whilst it's bad for men, and we can see that they're seeking some sort of guidance online, which is why these spaces have emerged, it's also bad for women, so they're tuning in too. Furthermore, women are extremely influenced by cultural trends, which is why we're seeing somewhat of an emergence of young women going down the more traditional route and posting all about it online. So for a while, I tried to play the both sides game, saying that social media has really negatively affected women and it's really negatively affected men. But having looked deeply into this now and having observed it pretty closely and even gotten amongst it, I can only call it how I see it, and my truthful analysis of the broader situation is that social media has affected women profoundly more than men. It is having a way worse effect on women than it is men. Social media is to women what porn is to men. Social media is a tool that enables the most
You hear
egregious
about the
forms
Israel-Hamas
of
deal?
attention-seeking and instant validation. And this is an absolute drug for women. The dopamine hits that they can get from this constantly is insane. And if they choose to go down the path
like even
of being a
before he's in
slave to this
office, he's
desire for
already
attention
fucking
and
stopped the war,
validation,
basically.
then it is a bottomless pit. And for men, porn is a way that they can easily access their sexual desires,
do you think of
which is
that?
obviously an equally dark spiral to go down. And something that I've clocked recently, and it's really become very obvious to me, is that many young women these days are so addicted to these apps, these social media apps, especially Instagram, and they're so invested in them that it actually becomes their identity. Their Instagram profile and whatever it is, the character that they're playing.
This is everything I eat in a day as a girl that loves raw milk and red meat. For breakfast, I had blueberries, raw bison bone marrow, and raw bison liver, along with a glass of raw goat's milk and honey.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
Whether it be the gym girl, or the sad girl, or the traveling girl, or the yoga girl, or even I saw one yesterday that was the autistic girl. This persona that they're putting on becomes more important than their actual real-world life. Furthermore, the hive mind that you see in purchasing patterns with young women online is quite astounding. They are so influenced by other girls who have crafted their own sort of internet personalities, and they will copy everything that they do. You look at people like Kylie Jenner and Hailey Bieber, if they just subtly wear some earring in an Instagram post, the next day, those earrings will be sold out worldwide. This sort of herd mentality is actually very bizarre, and I don't think men quite understand it, but the social media companies have really tapped into something there that is fundamental about the female psychology. So if the messaging is about feminism and being a boss babe and having your little notepad with the fluffy pens and having a great career, then that's what they're all going to do, even if it goes against their biology. But if the messaging is about family and about loving relationships and nuclear family, then they're going to do that. But at the moment, and I don't like saying this, I take no pleasure in saying this, I wish it weren't the case, Instagram in particular is fueling a viral strain of narcissism amongst a whole generation of women. You can imagine what a hot girl who has an Instagram following and thousands of men sliding into her DMs every single day, or even an average girl who photoshops her photos and puts filters on and gets the same attention. You can imagine what it does to their psychology. They have rich men of high status all around the world who are willing to fly them out, make them all of these offers and give them attention. And then they get trapped in this mentality where they think that is the level of man that they are attracting and they can never settle for anything less. And then this notion is only affirmed by mass media and feminism and their friends who say, "Yas Queen, never settle for anything less than perfect and happiness 100% of the time."
So do you think that it's an offensive thing to say if you say to somebody you're going to get less attractive as you get older?
Yes.
You think that's a hateful thing to say?
Definitely.
And if you think
100%.
And you think it's also a hateful thing to say somebody that you're not a 10?
100%.
But what they don't get told is that these high status men only want to sleep with them. They don't want to enter a relationship with them. They don't want to provide for them and protect them. But these women will mistaken this sexual attention, which is so easy to come by, with the kind of attention that signals that a man would like to enter a long-term relationship with them, which is obviously much more difficult and much more important. And what they also don't get told is that you're not going to be 22 and hot forever. Once you get past 30, you're done. You're not hot anymore in the eyes of these high-status men.
So you think that that's like an unreasonable thing to say? Why?
What do you mean, why? That creates negative emotions in people. It creates self-esteem issues. You're trying to give everyone self-esteem problems.
But like,
we're
not trying to do anything.
If I was to say to you, you're going to get really ugly as you get older, that might be a little bit of a self-esteem problem. Or if I was to say to you, you're a 2, that would be a self-esteem problem. But if I'm pointing out to you the objective reality that as human beings get older, we get less attractive.
That's a
in the eyes of
subjective
the world.
reality. I don't know what you're bringing.
So you think that an 80-year-old is more attractive than a 25-year-old?
Girl, that's not even thoughts I just want to bring.
Can you not call me girl?
Sorry, that's just how I talk. That's even.
But instead the messaging is that you'll age like a fine wine. Women get more attractive as they get older with more life experience. No, that's just not how it works. And so these factors are eroding the options of young guys who are just working an average job, average salary, keep in decent shape, good guys. I mean, a lot of them just don't have any options. And this is only getting worse as people embed themselves further and further into these fantasy social media lives.
Stop it. Get some help.
And so then where do men turn? Well, I mean, in the worst cases, they turn to OnlyFans, they turn to porn and other masochistic sort of places. But another thing we're seeing these dating podcasts and these internet spaces where men get together and try and logically sort of sort out the problems that they're facing. So with all this said, the dating market is an absolute mess at the moment. And this issue is in the same sort of ballpark as the destruction of the nuclear family, the deteriorating relationship between the sexes, declining birth rates, single mother homes, as well as all of the consequences of that. I mean, naturally, men want to be protectors and providers, and women want to be nurturers and mothers. That is our natural state. And we really aren't having a very good conversation at the moment about this profoundly important problem of feminism and social media and other factors that I haven't really mentioned as much, destroying relationships in the West, destroying traditional femininity and turning men into these low testosterone simps.
You can't come here and tell us what to do when you would never make that decision for yourself.
How does it feel to have zero pussy in your entire life? Zero pussy in your entire life.
And then these podcasts come along and they start doing this. They start having this conversation, obviously in the most outrageous and the most clickbaity and the most, like I said, controversy porn sort of way. And they're putting these sex workers in conversation with these more traditional people, traditional men, traditional women. And guess what? People lap it up. People are interested in it because it is actually relevant. The current situation we're in is one that people don't really know how to navigate because it's totally novel in history. I mean, I really think there's something happening here which people are so quick to shrug off as just a bunch of incel losers who are just angry at women. But perhaps we should really be having a better look at the social dynamics that are causing these issues. And if we look close,
See, but my problem is moms. Like, if you're a mom, you already have a career. You already have a full-time job. Raising a child is not a part-time nights and weekends gig. You cannot do it that way. And if you do, something's gonna take a hit at home.
That's true.
So,
I do agree with
I
that.
would say, like, the thing is, it's kind of a rock and a hard place for, like, the single people. Like, we're not talking about moms right now. Like, we're just, like, what are you supposed to do if you don't find a good guy who even wants to get married? Because, like, whenever I went to college, first of all, you get really excited, like, freshman year, because you're like, man, I'm gonna, like, get a boyfriend, and then I'll get a husband, because that's what you're raised thinking. You always think you're gonna find a person there. And then you quickly realize that first freshman year, ooh, people don't want to date. They definitely don't want to get married. So then, you graduate, you get a job. It's even harder like, dating apps are weird. Like, you're not gonna find anybody quality on there. So, like, what are you supposed to do? Panhandle? Like, you have to work. You have to.
Bills.
Well,
Right,
this
exactly.
is what I think.
So
a
I
lot
don't
of
know
the
how to
problem
fix
is.
that.
I think we raise women and we tell them focus the first 18 years of your life on getting good grades so you can get into a good school because you have to go to college. I was told this all the time growing up. You're going to go to college. You have to go to college. You're a loser if you don't go to college. You've got to get a degree and you've got to have a career. And so we tell women to do that, right? And then they go to college, they spend 4 to 6 years, they get an average of $40,000 in debt. They're 22 to 24 by the time they graduate. Then you have to establish your career. You didn't just spend 23 years of your life to, like, suddenly stay home. So it's like, well, I gotta establish my career. So they spend the next 5 to 10 years doing that. And then we expect them at 30, 32, 35 years old to suddenly, like, flip a switch, hurry up and get married and have a buzzer beater baby at the last second and transition to staying home. And that's super difficult for women on multiple levels, and it leads to a low birth rate, and it leads to a lot of women never getting married.
Well, I gotta make this one point too, because I know you're gonna get in. Why are buzzer beater babies bad? Aren't they good? I know, because I've had a lot of.
Better than nothing.
That's what I'm saying. Everybody's making fun of buzzer beater babies. I'm like, isn't it good they beat the baby? A buzzer beater shot's the best shot in the game. You mean,
I would rather you have any babies at all over no babies.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So-
But I think we give people backwards advice. I think women should be focusing their fertile years on building their family, and then once you're done with that, if you want to go off and do other things and have a career, I have friends who spent time while they were, raising their kids to go to school very part-time so that when the kids got much older and were about to leave, mom had a degree by then, and then if she wanted to go do something, in the workplace, she could.
There are a lot of women, especially now with our degenerate society, where a guy will get a woman pregnant and be like, I ain't doing nothing for you, and leave.
Yeah.
And the woman's going to be like, I can't do anything. I have a kid. I'm not getting rid of it.
Well, I think we should do something more like what Sparta did, at least, like
The babies in the woods.
Not put the babies in the woods. Maybe not. You only get a headstone if you die in childbirth. Okay, maybe not that extreme. But like to venerate motherhood and hold it in as high regard, and not sit. Because I had this happen to me. I had people that when I had my first child at 20 were like, oh, it's such a shame. Rachel's life is over. It's over for her. She'll never recover. She'll never be anything now. It's such a shame. She's so smart and she's just going to be a mom. And I was like, excuse me, but if I went and got some great job, they're going to replace me the day after I die. Me having 5 children that I raise well is going to have a ripple effect into the future that I can't even quantify. Why do you think that's not worthy me having a job is.
100%. Shout out to the mothers out there that are raising good people. If you are a mother that has raised people who are responsible, reliable, and respectful, say no more. You have done your part for humanity, and you have successfully completed the most difficult and important job in the world. And I also completely agree with Rach there that we have things a bit backwards in terms of encouraging young women to go to college and get an education during their most fertile years. They should be focusing on having children at that time, and then after that, you can do whatever you want. And if you do it in that order, then you can really have all of your bases covered. And also, buzzer beater baby is the perfect term for it.
Is this the Tiger?
And we've all seen this play out. We've all seen women who get into their 30s and all of a sudden they start desperately searching for a man to give her children or to beat the buzzer or the wall. And most of the time this is because she's put her career or having fun and traveling in her 20s over having children, because this is what the societal conditioning tells them to do. But the problem with buzzer beater babies is that sometimes you miss the shot and you don't get another chance because the buzzer has gone. And also, sometimes they're autistic or they have Down syndrome, especially if you have been taking birth control for the last 15 years and ruining your body. And this is a major biological advantage for men, I will admit. And it's one of the reasons that I'm so glad I am not a woman. The other reason being that they just never look like they're really having fun with their friends. When me and the boys get together, we really have fun.
Cheers! Cheers! Woohoo! Go, go, go! Yeehaw, girls. Good job.
But seriously, as a guy, you're pretty comfortably able to wait until you're 30 until you settle down. And by that stage, you've developed your competencies and you're probably more established and more financially stable and a better leader, a little bit more wisdom. However, as a woman, if you get to 30 and you're still single, you are in big trouble. And to be a young woman in the modern world, in her 20s, all of this programming and propaganda and conditioning, and to have the foresight and the wisdom to understand that if you're in your 20s is pretty impressive. And now on to the last bit where we'll look at a few highlights of Rach correcting Alex Stein on his libertarian views.
I got this great list here for all the feminists. We can rag on feminists. You guys like doing that, right? Here are the top here are the top jobs held by women in the US, ranked by the highest percentage of women in those roles. Preschool and kindergarten teachers, 97% women. Speech language pathologists, 96% women. Dental hygienists, 95. Childcare workers, 94. Medical records and technicians, 93. Secretaries, 92. Nurses, 90. Vocational nurses, 89. Elementary school teachers, 81. Human resource specialists, 70%. Oh, heaven help us. Now, among men, 90% of carpenters, 90% of carpenters are men. 90% of automotive service technicians, electricians, construction laborers, truck drivers, plumbers, pipe fitters, steam fitters, machinists, software developers, general maintenance, and first-line supervisors of production and operating workers, 84% men.
Yes.
This is like, you can see the polarization. Now here's the best part. I said list the jobs with the highest rate of mortality with the percentage of men and women in that job. Logging workers, 135.9 deaths per 100,000, 97% men. Fishing and hunting workers, 86 deaths per 100,000, 98% men. Aircraft pilots, 95% men. Roofers, 99% men. Refuse collectors, 95% men. Drivers and truck drivers, 94. Farmers and ranchers, 92%. Structural and ironwork and steel workers, 99%. Construction laborers, 96%. Ground maintenance, 95%. All of the top 10 jobs with the highest mortality, ranked from highest mortality to lowest, only in the top 10, are all 95+% male jobs.
Yes.
I don't want a woman flying my plane. I don't know if that's racist or not, or sexist.
No, it's racist.
I flew here and I saw a woman in the cockpit and I was like, Lord help us.
You had a female pilot?
Oh yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't mind if it's a
She was
transgender.
real chatty too on the line.
No, well, see, a male to female transgender pilot, I would feel more comfortable with than probably just a woman. No, I don't know. Like, you talked about turning point USA earlier too, and I guess that was to my point where, you know, maybe it's like they're not giving the right leadership advice, but I would argue I think they are giving the right leadership advice, because I guess different strokes for different folks. I don't think there is one angle or one lifestyle that fits everybody. So that's why, I mean,
Yeah,
that's
but
why.
that just that sounds like mumbo jumbo.
Does it? I
Yeah,
mean,
it really does. Like, oh, just different strokes for different folks. Yeah, to a certain degree, but there's only one group that can have babies, and we need women to do that. Like, when I say
so do you think
we
they
need
should
them
go up there and be like, just get pregnant women, that's all you can do is have a baby, that's all you're worth is just pooping out
Well,
babies.
what's wrong with that?
I'm
You
not
can have
saying-
babies. There's
I'm
nothing
saying-
worth being.
No, I'm saying there's nothing else in life other than that. I mean,
For
just
a woman, that should be your primary objective.
Okay.
Absolutely. It should be the center of your life, and it always has been through all of history until the last 30, 40 years.
well, I'm not saying women shouldn't
are
have
the only
babies.
people who can do it.
I'm not
right?
saying women shouldn't have babies, but I just think that, you know,
Why?
one
Preference? Just you prefer for women to be able to like do stuff? I mean,
No, I'm just saying women, if their main goal wants to be having babies, they should. If their main goal wants to be writing books or being content creators, they can do that too. I mean,
just like do whatever. Men
Do
don't
whatever you
have,
want all
Men don't have the luxury of just like, oh, follow your goals and your dreams. Just
that's what
follow
I'm trying to do. Is I do believe people should
Because
follow
when you
their
tell
goals.
women, well, Tim just pulled up what women do for jobs, and fun fact, it's almost the exact same stuff they were doing 100 years ago before suffrage. It's almost the same list. I think the CDC has a page with the top 20 careers that women had in 1920. Super similar. Some of the names of the occupations have changed a little bit, and the main thing is they swapped farm labor for HR work. That's kind of the main
It's
trade-off.
literally the same
It's the same thing. So now women are doing
laundresses.
Women are choosing to do the same things they did prior to women's lib, only now we get to pay for daycare to have some other random lady raise our baby while we work our retail job, and we get to pay income tax, and we get to finance a second vehicle and pay insurance on it. So like the cost of mothers working versus what they actually bring home, not such a great ratio, not a very smart way to do things, and it has had an effect on men's wages to some degree to have like this more gynocentric economy. Aaron Clary has a great book that he just wrote about the effect of this female-centered economy and like what the ramifications are. So, I mean,
it's a self-correcting force, though.
Well, this is the point I guess I'm trying to make is obviously I think women, it's so important that they do get pregnant and have babies. But like in the black community, we've created a system where women get rewarded for having babies out of wedlock instead of just having babies just to get more social services. And in that sense, I don't think that's great. I don't think that's smart.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that entirely. The highest rates of abortion are in the black community.
Yeah, but I know that might be a stat, but I know a lot of black people, I feel like they never get abortions.
but out of wedlock births and welfare spending, if you plot them on a graph from 1960 to now, they go up like this in tandem with each other. And why do we have so many out of wedlock births? Because feminism pushed birth control, abortion, no-fault divorce, sex out of wedlock as liberation. Hey, ladies, you should be having sex outside of marriage because that's freeing, it's liberating. You should be like the guys, you should stack bodies. We wouldn't have that if it wasn't for feminism.
Well, and that's why there's so many OnlyFans is because there's not that nuclear family, and so these women have daddy issues, and so that's where they want to get the gratification by showing their
I mean, it's daddy issues, but it's also attention. They
Look at
love the dopamine hit of the attention. Yes.
This is ChatGPT. I'm a big fan. I told it to, when you said plot a graph of welfare spending and out of wedlock births, I said do that. It did it since 1980 to 2015. Take a look at that.
You vindicated again. Look at that.
That's
And I want to say I'm pro-life. I'm happy all of these black single women had babies. I'm not saying that, but but it's just there is a thing where just having babies just to get more social services or something, it seems kind of.
But that's not what I'm advocating at all. I'm saying venerate motherhood. I'm saying encourage people. Make it shameful to have out of wedlock babies. Make it shameful to get divorced just because you wanted to find yourself. I'm on a journey.
I got
have to discover myself. So sorry, kids. Daddy's gone. Mommy's gonna run off with Mr. Johnson because he makes her feel sexy. That's the shit that needs to end.
Well, Rachel, you know stats. Who are more toxic in your opinion, men or women?
Who are more toxic?
Yeah, like who's more toxic for society overall?
Women now, because they're not under any sort of, there's no mechanism to control their insane behavior.
So you think women are...
I think women are now. I think we're in an inverted social order where there was built-in control mechanisms to balance the power for both sides before, and what feminism did was erase that and give women incredible amounts of unearned power that they don't know what to do with. So I think, yeah, I do think there's like toxic femininity going on.
I agree with you on that. Well, what was it? Women were they were approved for credit cards later than men. Isn't that how it works? So is that
That's the way it should be.
Is that how it should be? That
Yes, we
women
talked
shouldn't
about
have-
that last time I was here. You gotta be careful, Alex. We're gonna have to start calling you simp on a blimp.
I am simp. Have you never heard that? I get accused of being a simp all the time. I am a simp. I'm a woman lover. I guess I grew up, and I don't know. I'm a little bit of a simp. I agree.
Do you know why women didn't have credit cards and bank accounts until the 70s? Do you know why?
I don't know.
Because most people assume just the patriarchy wanted to, be mean to the women and control them.
I don't know why.
So the reason why is because women couldn't legally be held liable for family debts or for racking up, credit charges or something. So everything, only men could legally be held liable for the needs of.
But you could buy a house before. Women could buy houses before 1970.
Yeah, they could, but as far as providing for the family and things like that, so there's this suffrage poster I always post to social media from New York from 1912 or something, where it showed privileges for women under suffrage, and it said that in the state of New York, prior to suffrage, only men could be held liable for debt in a marriage. And even if the woman came in with money, so say you were an heiress
so you're
and you
fucking
married
rich
like a
now, huh?
middle class guy, even if that was the case, you came in with your own money, it was still considered your money. And so if you owed money, so say you opened a credit account at Bloomingdale's in New York, and the wife ran up charges at Bloomingdale's, she couldn't be held liable for the debt, only the husband could. So that's the reason they didn't have it in their name, but they were usually authorized users on all their husbands' accounts.
So great conversation there. Really enjoyed that. I always enjoy when Rach is allowed to just speak like that, because she's acquired a lot of knowledge about these topics from researching extensively over years for her book, Occult Feminism. And if you guys haven't read that, I'll leave the links below. And if you haven't seen my interview with Rach, I'll leave those links as well for you. Just on that last conversation there, this is the mainstream sort of conservative movement for you guys.
Oh, did you get
he
one
described
of the
giving
checks from the
birth
government
a
yet?
few minutes ago as pooping out babies. I mean, really? I
Supposed
get
to
it.
get,
he's trying to be
around,
funny.
$200,
He's a
I think.
comedian. And a few of the clips that he's done where he's
I think it
chasing
might
around
come in like 2
politicians,
checks.
they have made me chuckle, I won't lie.
AOC, my favorite big booty Latina. I love you, AOC. You're my favorite. She wants to kill babies, but she's still beautiful.
But I just think that the messaging on this one is so important. I mean, I just spoke for 3 hours about why the nuclear family is so important. But a lot of these conservatives don't really quite understand how conditioned
How
they
many
are by
fucking pencils
feminism.
in this
Feminism
house?
in the form of the sort of libertarian do what you want culture. They've been programmed to think that career is the most important thing, and that women who choose to have a family over career are somehow missing out on something, missing out on all those emails, missing out on all of those little staff parties where they have the cake for someone leaving. I mean, who gives a shit about that? Being a good mother is peak womanhood, period. In my view, it's not only important and right to venerate motherhood and the nuclear family when it comes to tackling the cultural issues and the cultural decadence that we are suffering at the moment in the West. Venerating motherhood and encouraging and pedestalizing motherhood is not only important, but it's fundamental. I mean, obviously the most fundamental thing is Christianity. Otherwise, we've got nothing to conserve and no basis for saying that anything should be conserved. But after that, it's the family. Everything good stems from good families. Crime and degeneracy overwhelmingly come from people who have had bad family lives and unstable upbringings. Family is the ultimate representation of love, of goodness, of truth, of sacrifice, of beauty, and it brings out the best and most selfless part of people, and it spreads goodness throughout the world. And there's so much more we could say about this, but I have taken up enough of your time today. I've chewed your ear half off with this one.
They're agreeing to a ceasefire? Ooh, woo! Trump ain't even officially in yet.
I
Oh
already
boy,
told you
this
how
should be
they're estimating the damages to be 250 billion. That's fucking crazy, man. Oh shit.
interesting. I didn't expect to hear this today.
We do want to share some breaking news with you as relates to the conflict in Gaza. Take a good look at your screen. Here at 842 on the East Coast, you're getting a live look out in Khan Yunis, Gaza, one of the areas heavily impacted by the Israel-Hamas conflict. The Associated Press reporting on this Tuesday morning that Hamas has accepted a draft agreement for a
That's what it always looks like when you see these movies set over in the Middle East. It always looks toe up.
Ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and the release of dozens of hostages. Two officials involved in the talks saying this did happen on this Tuesday. A mediator out in Qatar saying that Israel and the Palestinian militant group were at the, quote, closest point yet to sealing a deal, end quote. The Associated Press obtaining a copy of the proposed agreement and an Egyptian official and a Hamas official confirming its authenticity. And Israeli officials saying progress has been made, but the details are being finalized. The plan would need to be submitted to the Israeli cabinet for final approval. All three officials spoke on conditions of being anonymous to discuss the closed-door talks. To give you some perspective and background of this, the United States, Egypt, and Qatar, they have spent the past year trying to mediate an end to the 15-month-long war and secure the release of dozens of hostages captured in Hamas's October 7th attack that triggered all of this. Some 100 people are still captive inside Gaza on this Tuesday, and the military believes at least a third of them are dead. Now, any deal is expected to deliver a pause in fighting and bring Israel and Hamas a step closer in winding down the most deadly and destructive war they've ever fought, a conflict that has destabilized the broader Middle East and sparked worldwide protests. Part of the reason for that controversy is that looming humanitarian crisis. You can see that in real time as people have literally pitched tents because they are displaced, and then we know there are many camps set up where people were told that they would be free from the fighting, and unfortunately some of those camps have been targeted as well because Hamas will literally embed themselves inside and use those innocent people as human shields. Here at 845 on the East Coast, again, bringing you this breaking news, courtesy of the Associated Press. Hamas accepting a draft agreement for a Gaza ceasefire and the release of hostages. Again, this is preliminary information, so as we get more into our live now from Fox Studio, you'll be the first to know.
Okay, so preliminary. Sounds like they're close. Let's see, that was 9 hours ago. And what do we got here? There's another one. This one says on the brink also. This one's 11 hours ago. I think this is the closest that I found from different, news outlets that, that most of y'all watch. This is good news. This is good news. What we know about the potential, okay, let me see something. This one's an hour ago. Let's take a look at this.
We could be just hours away from a long-awaited ceasefire and hostage release deal in Gaza. Officials tell CBS News both Israel and Hamas have reached a draft agreement. Earlier today, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the Biden administration helped the deal gain momentum.
Really?
Over the past several weeks, our intensive efforts have brought us to...
I can't believe it.
...to bring a full and final agreement. I believe we will get a ceasefire. And whether we get there in the remaining days of our administration or after January 20th, I believe the deal will follow closely the terms of the agreement that President Biden put forward last May and our administration rallied the world behind.
CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio is in Tel Aviv with more.
Why am I surprised? Because Biden seems to like war. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm saying that. But okay.
What the eventual agreement could look like.
CBS News has learned from U.S., Israeli, and Arab officials that the draft for a ceasefire and hostage deal has been agreed to in principle, and if it all carries on smoothly, then Israel and Hamas will finalize it this week. Today, an Israeli government official here in Tel Aviv who wants to be anonymous told us the outlines of that deal. In phase one, Hamas would release 33 hostages made up of women, the elderly, the sick, and some children, in exchange for a higher number of Palestinian detainees in Israeli prisons. As for Israel's military presence in Gaza, that official said that assets, which we're understanding to mean military assets, would remain in Gaza, and that the IDF would establish a security buffer zone between southern Gaza and Israel. And as for the people of Gaza, humanitarian aid, which we know is so desperately needed now, especially in the height of winter, would be surged. The latest number we have on the death toll is over 46,500 people. That just crossed the 46,000 mark only last week. Pushing ahead to phase two, talks on that would start during phase one, and with the goal of releasing younger hostages and Israeli soldiers. But first, of course, phase one has to be agreed. If it does, implementation could start this weekend, with hostages starting to be released. The last time that happened was more than a year ago, but a reminder, we have been here before many times. Talks could collapse at any minute. Many are saying,
I hope not.
But again, one more time, there is that feeling of hope, and that official says in large part because of the U.S. and the double backing of the outgoing Biden White House and the incoming Trump White House. Back to you.
Remy Inocencio.
I can't imagine that living in a war zone like that. Bombs are raining down on your neighbor's houses, your house.
Thank you.
Wow, man. All right. Well, it's an update on it. Let's get it done, y'all. Let's get it done. Let me know if any more got any details in the comment section, alright? 10 million subscribers.
Insurance wants to ask, are you self-employed without business insurance? Imagine if I have a
happens in California and what have they done, I don't know. But the reality of it right now is when you say $150 billion of damages, think about the memories, all those homes.
And just thought maybe I can be there and put a hose on a roof if the embers start coming over at least. We're fighting as hard as we can to save our city. Gosh, I never thought I'd say that.
Turning exclusively to Uncensored. I'm done to say Dennis Quaid is back with me. Dennis, it's great to see you, and I really mean that, because if things have played out differently, you might not have been here. I mean, it's been utterly horrific to watch the scenes. I've got a home in Beverly Hills, and I've been watching these scenes with utter horror. I think the fires came within 150 yards of your place in Brentwood, I think. Just first of all, how are you? How are you dealing with this?
I'm doing fine. Piers, thanks for having me here. And my family's doing fine. We were evacuated the first day. I live in the Mandeville Canyon area, and I went back the next day on Wednesday, and that's when the fire came within 150 yards the first time of the house, and we had firefighters on my block just parked there ready to meet the fire when it came. I can't say enough about the firefighters who have come really all over the world to help out and fighting this fire. I was out there in case I could put a hose on my roof or anything I could do for that. And fire is an animal it's the scariest thing, I think, that we face in natural disasters. And I'm just glad to be here with you here today, and want to see my beloved city that moved out there in 1975, and see it come back.
Did you ever think, in all the time you've lived in LA, that you would ever see this kind of apocalyptic scenario unfold?
Well, been through many fires in LA. I had 2 fires in my Montana home. In fact, been through that. But nobody expected anything like this. Nobody ever dreamed that it would come down and go past sunset and cause the kind of destruction that it caused. It's just unbelievable. Mandeville Canyon, where I live, there's one way in, and there's a fire road at the top in case you need to evacuate there to get out. And the vegetation there's so much of it that it's like a tinderbox.
Yeah.
And starting about a year and a half ago, the insurance AIG pulled out. That was my insurance company at the time of California, and it became almost impossible to get fire insurance.
Yeah.
And that's I know a lot of people just last month where their insurance was canceled, and of course my heart goes out to those people. It's pretty bad.
Did you manage to get insurance in the end for your place?
Yes, we took insurance. It doesn't cover the whole thing, but at least we had some insurance that I could live with. I'm one of the lucky ones that's able to afford being able to take loss. But there's people out there that have just lost everything. And what leads to the question, I mean, the insurance companies know when they're all about probability that the worst case scenario has happened, and because they can happen, the worst case scenario. And the question is, do they look into the way cities handle any kind of fire protection, or what is the substructure of that city? And they knew something that we all didn't, or chose not to pay attention to, that an occurrence like this was going to happen, that they weren't willing to take the loss on.
And how many people do you know personally who've lost their homes?
At least 100.
Wow.
At least.
100 people?
Yeah. And I have one friend who lost 3 homes. He was living in one, he was renting another in the Palisades, and he just finished another home in Malibu that they were going to move into. And that was taken out just like that as well. And, I've heard a lot, well, these are rich people or whatever. These are people who work hard to make a success in life. For their families, they moved to the Palisades because it's so family friendly. It's a great place for kids to grow up. My son Jack, that's his boyhood memories are wrapped up there. It was the first place like he could go when he was about 9 years old with a couple of friends, and you felt good about letting him out there in the village to hang out with his friends and go to the stores and just have a good time. And that's all gone.
Yeah. Have you got any information about your property now? Do you know how close the fires have got since you were last there?
Well, Saturday, that was the big day where the fire came again within about 200 feet of the house. And in fact, if I was watching television that day, I saw my house and saw them fighting it.
Wow.
They were able to stop it. In fact, where my house is located, it was really kind of the choke point.
Hometown, all new.
I'm a change agent and a threat to them because Donald Trump was willing to choose me, to empower me, to bring the Defense Department back to what it really should
say so. And Happy New Year to you all. Let me start with Dave Rubin. I watched most of Pete Hegseth's stuff yesterday. And all I kept thinking to myself, I've got a lot of military in my family. My brother was a British Army colonel. My sister married a British Army colonel. My grandfather was a decorated commando. My great uncle was a decorated war hero, and so on. So I watched with great interest, thinking one thing. If I was in the US military, would I feel good or bad about what I heard from Pete Hegseth? And I concluded I'd be pretty happy that I had a guy there who not only had served his country for a long period with great personal courage himself, but seemed to really understand what is required from a military, and also seemed to pride actual meritocracy over mediocrity or virtue signaling or box ticking or DEI or any of these things. And I thought, yeah, if I'm in the US military, I think I'd probably like this guy being at the top of the pyramid. What did you think?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I can speak as someone that's on this side of the pond, that I have friends and family in the military, and they're happy about this too. You know, there's two things going on with Hegseth here, despite the, I would say, hysterical virtue signaling of some of the senators that you just showed there. The things are that he's qualified. There's very little question about his qualifications. But the other thing that I think is really allowing him to shine right now is his decade-plus time at Fox News, where he is able, as a TV presenter, that's what he's been, and a talk show host, he's able to communicate these ideas clearly. When he went out of his way to talk about equality and not equity, and that we should have meritocracy, and it's qualifications that should matter. These are all of the important things that we need to reintegrate, not only into the military in America, very obviously, instead of lowering our standards and caring about skin color and genitals and sexuality, but we need to reintegrate it across all of our institutions. That's the work for the broader Trump administration. But I think Hegseth, well, we also know he's going to pass. I mean, Thune, who's the majority leader, has already said it. I mean, it's basically a done deal already. But I think he's going to reform the military very quickly. And I think we're going to get back to having a functioning military that people can be proud of, rather than counting, you know, how many lesbian generals that wear dog collars we have. As important as that is, Michael Knowles.
Why are you pointing at me? Hold on. Wait.
I'm not going to bring that allegation to the fore before we have a Senate inquiry. Let me go to Wajahat. Wajahat, I mean, I've heard the criticisms about Pete Hegseth. I know him a bit from when I've done stuff on Fox. He's always been perfectly good to me, and always, I thought, a very good performer on television. But I also thought that under fire yesterday, and some of it got a bit personal and ferocious, he conducted himself calmly. He seemed very well informed. Clearly has some opinions about the military which others may not share. But I certainly didn't get a feeling of somebody out of his depth. And when you actually look at people who've held that job in the past, yes, some have been generals, but they can be pretty intransigent sometimes in their view about how things should be. And some have not been generals and are eminently less qualified than Pete Hegseth. So what was your view?
Look, I know that Republicans actually like affirmative action because they're perfectly fine with mediocre MAGA men and lowering the standards to the point where Pete Hegseth, the Fox News host, can slither under it and be the Secretary of Defense. For people who don't know, the Secretary of Defense overlooks a budget of over $900 billion, 3 million people. He is responsible in particular for defense policymaking. We're talking about law and order, national security. You're going to give it to Pete Hegseth, a man who was in the National Army Guard. His fellow colleague in the Guard looked at his tattoos and actually reported him to be an insider threat because it was so extreme. This is a man who wrote a book called American Crusade. In his book, Pete Hegseth said, I am too extreme for the U.S. military. In his book, Pete Hegseth said, I support these militias, these paramilitary forces. In his book, he calls the enemies liberals extremists. So much for unity. This is a man, not just adultery, but sexual impropriety. He has been alleged of sexual impropriety and sexual assault. If he has nothing to hide, release the woman that he has signed to an NDA and paid off. Let her tell her story. This is a man whose own mother sent one of the most damning emails I've ever heard and read in my life. If your mother sends the email that Pete Hegseth's mother said you have failed in life, accusing him of being a sexual abuser, a man whose own Fox colleagues have said, allegedly in the New York Times, that they're worried about his alcoholism, alcohol problem, and a man who has economic impropriety allegations. He was released from 2 nonprofits. What are we doing here, Pierce? Listen, with Marco Rubio, I disagree with him. You don't see me here complaining. Qualified guy, intelligent guy, Secretary of State, fine. Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense, what are we doing? You guys are putting lipsticks on a pig and you're making America less safe. And the right wing in MAGA is doing this for Pete Hegseth. Okay. You're making this country less safe just because you're bending the knee to Donald Trump and he wants a lapdog, who, by the way, I'll agree with Dave on this, who's good on TV.
Okay,
So that's what
I'm
we're
going to come to Michael.
Trade
But
our national security for Pete Hegseth.
Okay.
Release the woman from the NDA. I want to hear from the woman. Secretary of Defense, let's defend women
all
for
right,
Pete
you
Hegseth.
made your point.
That's my take.
You made your point. Any negatives while we're at it?
He works
It's a
out.
joke. It's a joke,
A lot of
Vijay.
tattoos
It
come
was
here.
a joke. It's a joke. You haven't actually taken that seriously. Let me bring Michael in here. I mean, look, a whole litany of stuff there, almost all of which was put to Pete Hegseth. I thought he actually batted away all of that stuff. We've got a clip actually of him batting away one. Let's take it.
All they were out to do, Mr. Chairman, was to destroy me. And why do they want to destroy me? Because I'm a change agent and a threat to them, because Donald Trump was willing to choose me, to empower me, to bring the Defense Department back to what it really should be, which is warfighting. So I am willing to endure these attacks. But what I will do is stand up for the truth and for my reputation. False attacks, anonymous attacks, repeated ad nauseum, printed as nauseum, as facts. We have provided to the committee, Mr. Chairman, and I know you're going to share, on-the-record statement after on-the-record statement from people who have served with me, worked with me at Fox News, Concerned Vets, Vets for Freedom, you name it, from the top of the chain to the bottom, who will say I treat them with respect, with kindness, with dignity. That's men, that's women, that's black, that's white, that's every background. I have prided myself as a leader of respecting people, being professional.
Michael, I thought that was quite an effective response, really, because a lot of it is just innuendo, hearsay, unsubstantiated allegation. Other stuff has been settled, as Wajahat says. That's not uncommon in America. It's incredibly common for people to do NDA settlements or whatever with no blame or liability attached. Where do you sit with this? I mean, it looks like Hegseth is going to get...
I don't know about you. That's not common.
Sorry?
That's not common, not for me. I don't know about you, but that's not common.
I'm not saying for you or me.
There's a police report where I
in
sexually assaulted
America,
a woman and I signed her
in
to
America,
an NDA, but
that
okay.
kind of settlement is not uncommon, is my point. Just generally, in the American system, a lot of things get settled that way without any admission of liability or wrongdoing, which is the case with Pete Hegseth. Michael, where do you sit with this?
Well, so much of what Wajahat just said is not true, or as you point out, Pierce, is completely unsubstantiated, like the allegations that Pete Hegseth shows up drunk to work. I've been, excuse me one second, Wajahat. I've been on that morning show with Pete a number of times. I've been in studio with him a number of times. The only thing you could accuse Pete of is being too alert and energetic. I found it overwhelming, actually, while I was there, tired, trying to dust the sand out of my eyes. But you suggest that the graduate of Princeton and Harvard, who for decades has been in the U.S. military, served his country honorably, that he's somehow unqualified to work at the Pentagon. The most egregious accusation you make against him, though, is that he's an extremist because he has a tattoo. Could you tell us what the tattoo is?
The tattoos, specifically, I did not make the allegation that he's an extremist. It was actually
You repeated the
fellow
allegation. So
colleague
what's
who
the
called him
tattoo?
as an insider threat.
Yeah, right. So
It
what's
was
the
not
tattoo?
me. It was his fellow
No, hang on,
colleague.
let Wajahat answer, because Wajahat raised the tattoo. Wajahat, it's a fair question. What is this tattoo that you're so upset about? Wajahat, hang on.
Wait.
Wajahat, hang on. Simple question. What is this tattoo that you're so upset about?
I wasn't the one upset about it. I was talking about his fellow colleague. This is exactly what I said. His fellow colleague.
Do you know what it was?
In the U.S. Army, called him out as a potential insider threat.
Well, what is the
looking at
tattoo?
The tattoos on his chest.
What is the
and
tattoo?
Also, I called him an extremist based upon his own book. Read the book.
What is
American
the
Crusade,
tattoo?
His own words.
If you don't know what the tattoo is, just admit it.
Oh my lord. Listen,
What is it?
What the tattoo is?
Wait. No, I'm genuinely intrigued. Do you know what it is or not,
We've got a
Wajahat?
panelist.
Wajahat, do you know what it is or not?
She hasn't spoken yet. A woman hasn't spoken yet.
She's going to come. She's going to answer the question, and you're not answering. Final question to you,
I did answer it,
Wajahat.
but
Final
go ahead.
chance.
I got my colleague right here.
Be
to
honest.
my- to
Be
my
honest,
right. Go for
Wajahat.
it.
Do you actually know what that tattoo is or not?
Listen, what I do know is I read his book, and in his book, if
Do
you read
you
it,
know
called
or
American
not?
Crusade, in his book.
Wajahat.
Wait a second.
Be
In
honest.
his book.
Be honest.
I am. Look.
Ironically,
you guys are putting lipstick on a pig
no one's going to
and
crucify
literally
you
bending
if you
the
don't
knee
know
for
the
Donald
answer.
Trump,
But do you know the
putting
answer?
our national security at risk for Pete Hegseth. I'm telling you everything, and you guys are finding ways to spin. Why are you guys
No,
okay
we're
with a
simply
man
asking you.
who has an NDA
We're
with a
simply
woman that he
asking you.
allegedly sexually
Do
assaulted?
you know what
Why
the
are you guys
tattoo
okay?
is
I
that
said
you got
exactly
so
what I
upset
said.
about?
It was his colleague. His colleague called him out as an insider threat, not me. His colleague. And I also said, go to his book, read his words.
Just to be clear, Wajahat, you
he
got
says, I'm
Wajahat,
too extreme from the U.S. military. Pete Hexet's own words. Why are you okay with that, Michael?
Wajahat, you don't know,
Michael, why are you guys okay with that?
You don't know,
literally in his book, American Crusade, he says he's too extreme from the U.S. military.
You don't know, do you?
Oh my gosh. All right, let's look it up right now because...
No, don't look it up. Don't look it up. Let's go back to Michael. Michael, what do you... Hang on. Michael, we gave him his chance. He obviously had no idea. Michael, what is the answer?
This falls along a threat as an insider
threat. I've gone back to Michael now.
2021 pegged Pete Hexet as a potential
insider. You had 98 chances to answer and you failed the test. Sorry. I'm going to Michael. I'm going to Michael. Don't talk over each other. Michael.
The tattoo in question is called a Jerusalem cross. That this is a medieval Christian symbol, goes back a long time. In fact, at Jimmy Carter's funeral, there was a Jerusalem cross on the floor of the cathedral, and on the program for the funeral, there's one other tattoo that some have suggested could be extremist. It's the phrase Deus Vult, which is a medieval Christian slogan, a long traditional slogan that refers to God's will, and it goes back a long way. These are very traditional, very mainstream Christian symbols that not only are not extreme in any way, but which even the people who want to accuse him of extremism couldn't possibly name. That is pathetic.
All right.
No, not really. His insider guardsman did it, which is what I said, and also I said that he called himself too extreme for the U.S. military in his book. That's pathetic.
Okay.
So is Pete Hexet lying that he's too extreme in his book?
Let me go to Julie. He's been waiting.
He's too extreme for radical leftists.
Let me go to Julie. Let me go to Julie.
He said it. Is he lying?
Be gentlemanly, please. We have a lady who's not spoken. Julie, be waiting very patiently. Your view of this. I'll tell you what, before you answer, I know you said in your Substack about this, under normal circumstances, Pete Hexet, would be precluded from serving in any leadership role. So explain why you said that.
Well, I'll explain in a second. Let me go back to something that was said in the very beginning, that he spent more than 10 years at Fox News, and that's what qualifies him to be in his position that he wants to be in. I spent more than 10 years at Fox News. I don't think I'm qualified to run the DOD whatsoever based on my time at Fox News.
I said that was one of your things.
If you, well, I don't think that's even a remote qualification. That's one.
Being able to communicate ideas as the Secretary of Defense and explain policy is actually a very big part of the job.
There are plenty of qualified Republicans out there who can run the DOD who also are good on television. It does not need to be Pete Hexet. Secondly, again, you talked about NDAs. I am bound by an NDA at Fox News. If I were not bound by an NDA and Fox News wanted to release me from that NDA, I could tell you about my time with Pete Hexet. Unfortunately, that's not possible. But I will say that the reason that there are so many people who anonymously came forward at Fox News is that because they're also bound by confidentiality provisions, which 1/3 of all American workers need to sign on their first day of work. And if they were to go public, they could get sued. The reason this accuser is not heard from is because, according to the New Yorker, she tried desperately to meet with Joni Ernst on the committee, and Joni Ernst turned her down. So the reason that she has not been able to come out publicly is because she has an NDA, and even privately, she could not meet with a senator on this committee who's also a rape survivor to share her story, because that rape survivor did not want to hear from a woman who was going to put her potentially in a position to vote against Pete Hexet. Pete Hexet has written himself while at Princeton, saying that women who are passed out, if if you have sex with them while they're unconscious, that's not really rape. Right? Now, the American military has a tremendous sexual assault problem. A horrible sexual assault problem. I have spoken to women in the military who say on deployment, it's not a question of if, but a question of when they will be sexually assaulted. We cannot possibly have somebody running our military who has said that women who are unconscious deserve to be raped because it's not really rape. You can just go have your way with them. So I don't know which soldiers you've been talking to who think Pete Hegseth is a great thing for the military. There's not one woman out there who cares about being assaulted on deployment who thinks that this is the person that needs to be in charge of the United States military. And as for the cross that you talked about, yes, Deus Vult, which is the cross that he has, and the slogan that he has, it is an old Christian cross. The phrase, however, was uttered by crusaders as they were slaughtering Jews and Muslims during the Second Crusade specifically. So it's not just a random cross. It's not just a random phrase.
That isn't true. The phrase.
It's not true.
It is true. The phrase was uttered after the Council of Clermont, when Pope Urban II declared the crusade. And it was actually probably Dieu le veut, but it's been rendered in Latin as Deus Vult. It has nothing to do with slaughtering Jews. It has nothing to do with slaughtering Muslims, because the Muslims had invaded Europe, not the other way around.
Oh my God, are you really saying that the reason the crusade, which was sent to the Holy Land to liberate the Holy Land, from whom? From Jews and Muslims.
The crusade began because the Eastern... I'll tell you why the crusade began, because the Eastern Emperor asked for help from the Western Pope, because the Seljuk Turks were slaughtering Christians in the Holy Land. Because those lands were Christian before the Muslims invaded in the 2nd century. So that's why.
No. Those
good
crusades.
to know Michael's pro-crusade.
Those lands became Christian after the First Crusade. Okay. So let's be very clear.
The lands were Christian in the 1st and 2nd centuries, and then the Muslims. Islam didn't exist before the 2nd century. What are you talking about?
Okay, I could listen. I can go all day if you want to talk about the Crusades, but the point is, I can also show you literature. What that has to do with Pete Hegseth is it's not that he has a random cross that talks about his faith in Jesus Christ. He used a very specific terminology. But putting all of that aside,
was first uttered to defend persecuted Christians in the Middle East, just like they're being persecuted today.
Okay, if you want to talk about the Crusades,
that's who you want as the Secretary of Defense. Wonderful.
Yes, someone who defends the persecuted.
Julie, finish your point. Julie, finish your point, and I'll go to Michael. To Dave.
My point is that I cannot even believe that something the Vatican apologized for is something that you're defending, which is the slaughter of Jews and Muslims during the Crusades.
What did the
I'm making my Proline Plus picks, and for good luck, the squad's getting together to watch. It's our own game time ritual. When you bet with friends, the excitement doesn't always end at the buzzer. Make things interesting with Proline Plus.
Excuse me, the Vatican said the Crusade. Jesus. You know what? Why don't you give me a call after this, and I will walk you through exactly.
All right, let's try and bring things back. All right, let me. All right,
the treatment of Muslims in the Crusades. But if you want to talk about,
we'll do a separate Crusades debate another time. Let me bring Dave Rubin in. Dave, the issue of DEI came up quite a lot in Pete Hegseth's day yesterday, and there's certainly been a growing sense of DEI invading almost every aspect of American life, society, culture, and so on, including the military. I thought he landed some pretty effective points on that as well. And coming at a time when you see people like Mark Zuckerberg, who were leading the kind of charge of DEI and liberal woke policy, now doing these screeching U-turns, recognizing that actually it wasn't right, it wasn't fair, it wasn't equitable, it effectively has collectively encouraged mediocrity over meritocracy and so on. And I thought he was effective on that, Pete Hegseth.
Oh, I thought he was quite effective because he is a TV presenter and knows how to communicate ideas effectively. He has been well-versed in interviewing people and discussing this and talking to people inside the military and inside of all of our institutions and corporations that have been wrecked and ransacked by DEI. The idea of America is based on individual rights. We do not care about your sexuality or your gender or your skin color or any of those other immutable traits. What we care about is, especially in the military, which we all, regardless, I think, of political allegiance, would like to be effective and be able to protect Americans and American interests. We want people who are competent, who are physically fit and mentally fit, to do these jobs. We can only, I mean, there's a million examples I can give you here, Piers, but we only need look at what's going on with the California fires right now and the amount of time that the fire department and the administration and Gavin Newsom and the mayor and LA and California as a whole spent on diversity in the fire department rather than figuring out ways to go about combating fire properly and preventing these things. And that's the exact same thing that the military is going through. It's, by the way, exactly what Mark Zuckerberg was going through at Facebook, where he was dealing with an insurrection of his own employees who were woke and trying to silence everybody and the rest of it. So all of these things are deeply connected. And I would say, if we're going to save America, which I think we're 5 days away from turning around a lot of this nonsense, these hearings are a great example of seeing how the ideas of equity are actually completely antithetical to everything that this country was founded upon.
Yeah, Bajai, I actually want to segue into something else, which is the breaking news as we started this. Donald Trump has gone on his Truth Social platform. We have a deal for hostages in the Middle East. They will be released shortly, thank you. The BBC also reporting a deal between Israel and Hamas has been agreed. It's a complex deal. It involves the release of 30-odd hostages over a period of 6-7 weeks and many more Palestinians being released from jail and various other security guarantees and ceasefires and so on. All multi-layered, complex. Has to be seen whether A, this is official, which looks like it may be in the next day or two, and secondly, if it's workable and if it actually gets carried out. But what is your gut reaction to the sort of overall deal that is apparently in play here?
You know, I've been on your show for the past 15 months, Pierce, and you and I have talked about what's been happening. I think initially, October, you know, you and I agreed that what Hamas did was a terrorism attack. It was atrocious. Israel had a right to respond. But you and I have also seen the devastation of the past 15 months. The Lancet just came out with this journey, with this peer-reviewed study that said actually the casualties might be 40% more, Pierce. So right now we know that 45,000 Palestinians have been killed. That could be up to 65,000, 70,000. We know Israel has bombed churches. I know Michael cares a lot about churches right now, but I'm curious to see if he's okay with Israel bombing churches, mosques. It has killed UN workers. It has killed journalists. It has not allowed journalists inside to look at the damage. It has actually killed refugees. It has bombed refugee camps. It has bombed UN workers. More children have been killed in the past 2 years in Gaza than all the war zones combined in the past 2 years, right? Right now, we know that the majority of the people that have been killed have been women, children, and the elderly, civilians. So in this particular case, we've heard this before in the summer, right? There was a deal. What's the best deal? Ceasefire, hostages. There are about 100 Israeli hostages who are still captured by Hamas. I talked to a father of an Israeli hostage, Yehuda Cohen, who blames Netanyahu for the current situation. He says that Netanyahu's to blame for being belligerent, for advancing this war, for rejecting the ceasefire deal when it was in place, right, in the summer. It was President Biden. Remember that, Pierce? I was on your show. President Biden came out and said, hey, this is Israel's deal. Let's do it. And they keep slow walking it because they have an expansionist view. They want everything from the river to the sea. I hope this time, Pierce, and I said this before on your show, whether it's Trump who does it, whether it's Biden who does it, the war has to end. Ceasefire deal for the hostages. Bring the hostages home, do a ceasefire deal, end this bombing, end this pain, end this suffering. A genocide, according to Amnesty International, a genocide, according to Human Rights Watch, a genocide, according to Israeli scholars of genocide, who've been saying it for a while. This particular situation where both Hamas leaders and Netanyahu are war criminals, according to the ICC, end this once and for all. If it happens, then maybe, just maybe, there could be some peace. You need rebuilding humanitarian aid in Gaza. You need the Gazans who've been displaced to come back to the north. You need the hostages to be released. So if it can happen, Pierce, I don't care if it's Trump who does it. I don't care if it's in the last week of Biden. It has to be done.
Okay. I mean, Michael, it seems to me that all the heavy lifting has been done in the last few days by Trump and his Middle East envoy, and that's really speeded things up. Also, I think Trump saying, if this isn't resolved by my inauguration, there's going to be hell. And I suspect Hamas has taken him at his word. We never quite explained what that hell would take, but they clearly, I think, have been racing to try and do a deal or maybe procrastinating over. Your response to Wajahat, what do you feel about this deal?
Well, I think every person of goodwill agrees with Wajahat on the minor point, or on the narrow point rather, that we want to see an end to the war. Probably not with some of his claims about the war, but we want to see an end to the war. That includes Jews, that includes Muslims, that includes Christians. As Wajahat mentioned, ancient churches that have existed in the Holy Land long before Islam ever existed, have been...
We lost Michael. We'll bring in Dave. Let's bring in Dave as his running mate. Dave, we'll bring you in here because we lost Michael Knowles there.
God
well,
probably
Michael
intervened
is a bit more
in
of
that
an expert on the Crusades, but I think I can handle the rest of it. Look, everyone wants an end to the war, and the war could have been over on October 8th. All they had to do was release all of the hostages, and no one would have been supporting any sort of military action, right? That's obvious and real, and we all know it. Hamas has intentionally placed civilians in the way. We all know that as well. There is no genocide. I would love to hear any panelists call for Egypt to open up the border and let all the Gazans in, but no Arab country, no Muslim country wants any of the Palestinians. There never was a Palestinian state, and if there was, tell me who the prime minister was. This is just an endless assault on Israel. There's not going to be peace in any real way. There's no such thing as the two-state solution. There never were two states. Palestine used to be the place that the Jews lived. A lot of Jews just celebrated Hanukkah. You know where Hanukkah took place? The Judean Hills, which we now unfortunately call the West Bank, but that's because the Jews lived there. So this is largely, we can get into the, okay, they're going to, give away 30 hostages, or they're going to get one hostage back for 30 Palestinians who have blood on their hands or anything else. That tells you right there who actually values life here. So I'm not, look, it'll be nice to get back some people, and hopefully Americans. As an American, I do hope that the 5 or 6 Americans who have been held will return. But I'm not bullish on peace or anything else at the moment.
Julie, what do you feel about this? I mean, it's obviously an extraordinarily complex situation. I don't think there'll be any clean way out of this for many years. But do you feel that this deal, which they're talking about, is at least a step in the right direction?
Tap into roulette with exclusive live tables and lightning fast action. Tap into roulette. Tap into Betano. Betano, the game starts now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that it's too complex to lend itself to some short sound bites. It's a deal, right? And it's a deal. I'm happy for the families whose loved ones are being released. But I think Dave did touch on something. I don't agree with a lot of what he said, but he did touch on something, which is I don't know what the end solution to this is. Because you had Ariel Sharon give Gaza, effectively give the land that Gaza land right now to the Palestinians. And in an election, they elected Hamas after a short period of time. So what do you do if you're Israeli when you have that kind of threat on your border? It's not to excuse what the Israelis are doing in the West Bank right now. It's absolutely atrocious, and I say that as somebody who has a lot of family in Israel. I don't support it. Fully for the two-state solution, but it has to be 2 states where one of those states is not run by a terrorist organization like Hamas.
No, it doesn't have to be a two-state solution there. There's no reason for anyone to think there should be a two-state solution. They can go to Jordan, they can go to Egypt. Gaza was part of Egypt, remember? West Bank was part of Jordan. Judea and Samaria was part of Jordan.
Why would they have to go to Jordan and Egypt when they've been living on this land for generations? I mean, the reality is,
well, if they're being genocided and all of the other things that the other panelists said right there, they might want to look into that. You might want to, if any of that is true.
Or how about
there's one place in the Middle East where Jews and Christians and Muslims live peacefully. It's Israel, ironically.
Piers, I have a solution.
But listen, have you been to Israel recently? Let me just say this. Let's be very clear. Okay, so let's be very clear. There are places in Israel where they live peacefully, and there are places in Israel where settlers are not allowing Muslims to live peacefully. So let's not put this all on just the Muslim population.
Where are the Muslims allowing the Jews to live peacefully? Where are the Muslims allowing the Jews to live peacefully? I walked around in Jerusalem where you can walk around with Orthodox Jews walking next to women in burqas. Where are the Muslims allowing the Jews or the Christians to live peacefully? Ask the Coptic Christians of Egypt.
Listen.
How many Jews are left in Morocco? Any Jews in Jordan, these days? We could go through all the countries.
I'm not gonna listen. I'm not disagreeing with you on how the Muslim countries have treated Jews. You're absolutely right. I will answer your question.
You're right. There's 2 million Muslims in Israel. They live with equal rights.
So you're not.
Yeah.
So
Allah.
you're not allowed to answer the question.
May I, as a resident Muslim,
let me just answer his question.
Sure. Go ahead.
Rajah has a solution. Go on.
No, go ahead. But you wanted to finish your point. Please, go ahead.
Julie.
Well, my only point that I want to finish is, look, there's no question that in the West Bank, which I would hope would one day lead to an independent, safe Palestinian state that wants to live in peace with its Israeli neighbors, that there are settlers there who are not necessarily allowing Muslims to live in peace at the moment. Okay, I'm not suggesting that Gaza is a whole different story, but you can't put this just on the Palestinians. There are elements within Israeli society that are also prone to violence, and you can't say that there aren't. It's not a black or white issue. It's a deeply complex issue.
About a half dozen times over 20, 30 plus years.
You're absolutely right.
The Palestinians have rejected every single peace deal.
You're absolutely right.
Here I go.
You're absolutely right, and nobody has screwed the Palestinians more than their leadership. You're absolutely right on that.
I think we can probably all agree with that.
No Israeli government has actually ever tried. Israeli governments, whether they're Labor or Likud, have never tried ending the occupation in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, and in Gaza. What they haven't done is end the settlements. The settlements have actually expanded in the West Bank. Right now, in the West Bank, Hamas is not under control. There's 2.5 million Palestinians who live under military law. There's about 750,000 Israelis who live under Israeli law. An unequal system. You've been there, Pierce. I've been there. It's horrifying. This is why Desmond Tutu and Jimmy Carter, rest in peace, called it what? Apartheid. Their words, not mine. I've been there. I've seen it. We are complicit in it. Hamas is not in control. There's no excuse. We have Ben Gvir, the national security minister, a man who Israeli reporters told me is like, imagine if the KKK was elected as a national security minister. That's the national security minister under Netanyahu. Netanyahu has openly said, I want river to the sea. He laughed and mocked and said, aha, I have blocked the peace deal. I have blocked two-state solutions. When President Biden said end settlements, he added 3,000 more settlements. When President Biden said don't bomb Rafah, he bombed Rafah. When President Biden said don't kill civilians, he bombed the World Trade Center kitchen staff. Remember that? It is a chaos to the point where everyone in the world, except in the U.S. and except in Israel, they see Israel as becoming a pariah, increasingly an extremist Jewish supremacist state. If it was up to David, river to the sea, let Israel do what it wants and continue the occupation. Dave said Palestinians don't exist. There's no such thing as Palestinians. So David, today, you have gone on the side against justice and on the side of Pete Hegseth, but since you're so good on TV, wait, let me finish. I let you say your hateful stuff. Let me finish. Since you're so good on TV, based on your own logic, you should replace Mike Huckabee as the ambassador to Israel.
All right.
You're great on TV.
All right, let me switch to something else. So you mentioned President Biden. He's come out with his farewell letter, Dave, President Biden. I mean, I've read some deluded claptrap in my time, but Biden's self-appraisal of basically how he saved America and the world is pretty priceless. And I watched his stuff he said on television the other night as well. The guy seems to be tripping towards retirement in an utterly deluded manner about his presidency, isn't he? Dave, that's for you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear who the question was for. Well, look, this is the obvious end to an utterly embarrassing, pandering, and I would say, frankly, almost illegal presidency. The man has been cognitively impaired. We all knew it, or most of us knew it. I was doing videos on this back in 2019. The idea that he's been in charge of this administration is a complete sham. He can't speak off the cuff, obviously. He can barely read off the prompter. We're just watching the end of something that, look, they cooed him over the summer, right? He wanted to run. We know Jill wanted him to run. Kamala Harris and Barack Obama and whatever party leaders, they threatened him with the 25th Amendment. This entire thing has been one sham after the other. And I think, after we have 5 more days of this, we're going to probably see Joe Biden about 3 more times. And then there will suddenly be a letter released, and it will say that he has been dealing with these cognitive issues. They knew it. Blah, blah, blah. And then it will leak out. Over the course of the next year, there will be plenty more to leak out, but he has not been in charge. It is a miracle we got through these 4 years, and we're going to have to deal with a lot of the fallout that he put in. But I'm very bullish, obviously, on Trump and this administration and the people he's bringing in, including Pete Hegseth. And I think we're going to see a lot of positive change very quickly, and it couldn't come too soon.
Yeah, I mean, Julie, I've heard Democrats trying to defend Joe Biden. They're sort of running out of energy for it. I think everyone kind of knows now that this is an old guy, probably suffering from a form of dementia, who's just
why is he
stammering
swerving
and
like
stuttering and falling his way through to the end of what has turned out to be a pretty poor presidency, isn't it?
That's sick.
Have you listened to Donald Trump? I mean, I'm listening to this and I'm kind of in shock. Have you listened to what comes out of Donald Trump's mouth, who, by the way, is an insurrectionist?
Well,
and all of a sudden you're talking about
and all I see is a guy. Well, it's
now?
interesting you mentioned Trump. So I see a guy in Trump who's 2 years younger than Biden, but looks about 20 years younger than Biden, and still has.
Well, I'm sure if you got
he does.
Yeah, Biden makes the mistake of not getting airbrushed every day. But look, here's the bottom line: Joe Biden is leaving Donald Trump a very strong economy. Donald Trump promised to bring down, and I quote, the price of bacon, the price of eggs, and the price of apples. I can't wait to watch those promises. And on January 20th, that clock starts. Those are commitments that he made. And he's going to have to live up to them. He's going to have to live up to the fact that he's going to explode the American economy even more than it's gangbusters right now. And you have to admit, the American economy is doing better than any other Western country.
Okay.
He's going to have to come through on his promises
to
deport people. Deport people.
Yeah, I agree.
Wait, stop. Mass deportation, tariffs on everybody, and keep the economy going, and bring down the price of goods. I can't wait to see him pull that rat. Listen, I'll be the first to say when he does that, I'll be the first to compliment him. But right now, I'm going to sit back and watch him try to do that.
Okay, good.
Oh shit, what car is this?
I look forward to it. You're right, it's on Trump. Turning now to the LA wildfires, the bill for rebuilding Los Angeles is now estimated to be $250 billion, even as the city braces for yet more devastation today. Now, Speaker Mike Johnson suggested that federal aid for California may be conditional on big changes in the government. Well, that hasn't gone down well with some, including Whoopi Goldberg, who says it's unfair to hold anyone accountable for an historic national disaster.
Having lived in California, having lost every house save for one that we ever lived in, I take great offense at pointing fingers. You should be pointing fingers about how can we help? Yeah. It's too soon to be saying, oh, it's Gavin's fault. It's nobody's fault. It's like us taking seriously that there are, magic lasers in the sky that direct the weather. That doesn't work. It doesn't happen. This is a catastrophe, and this is what's happened. And let's try to figure out how to work towards not having it happen again. But, we don't control Mother Nature. Mother Nature doesn't give a damn what we want. Mother Nature does what she does. And if you're in the way, this is what happens. And California is chock full of people.
Well, we've got Michael back. Michael, welcome back. Sorry we lost you temporarily there. So start with you, given you've rejoined us. I just couldn't disagree with them more. And also, I have a fundamental belief that if it was a Republican-controlled setup in California, she'd be saying the complete opposite. And the View regularly rants about Republican failures of accountability. And the truth is, I have a home in LA, which thankfully is still standing, and I hope it continues to do so. But I know so many people who've lost their homes who are incandescent with rage about what they perceive to be persistent failures right across the board of the mayor, Karen Bass, who fled the country, having said she'd never leave the country. She went to Ghana for an inauguration as these winds were coming in, as fires were breaking out. Unbelievable dereliction of duty. You've got the Justin Trudeau of the operation in Gavin Newsom, who I think deserves a lot of heat, literally, for what is going on here, and a lot of accountability. So this idea that they all should be blameless because, nature, I think is still a bird.
Of course, and Whoopi's argument here that this was unpredictable and inevitable would be more persuasive if you hadn't had many people, up to and including President Trump, personally warning Gavin Newsom that this would happen in 2018, 2019, just at the end of last year in 2024. It was not inevitable and an act of nature that 95% of Delta rainwater was sent into the Pacific Ocean rather than filling reservoirs. It wasn't an act of nature that the Pacific Palisades Reservoir was empty, was turned off before the predictable, perennial Santa Ana winds. It was not unpredictable that you'd have 100-mile-an-hour winds. That happens regularly in LA. It was not nature and inevitable that LA wouldn't have cleared its brush. You know, these were basic political problems. Even people who were not expert in it could have seen this coming a mile away and did. And so the residents of LA, I'm a former Angelino myself, they deserve some answers. And the politicians, Newsom and Karen Bass in particular, need to be held accountable.
Of course, Karen Bass has turned out to be utterly useless. Everybody from her silence when she finally flew back from this jolly to Ghana, no need to do that. And she knew these winds were coming in. She then says nothing to Sky News is the most paralyzing, embarrassing scene I've ever witnessed with the mayor coming back to a disaster. And every public update since has been, frankly, just utterly pointless and nonsensical and contributes nothing to anyone. The idea that she should continue to be considered blameless is of nature. When you've got the person she beat, Rick Caruso, who I think lost because he's a rich white billionaire, but actually specializes in property and development. You know, it comes down to this for me. Who do I trust more to rebuild LA? Is it Karen Bass or is it Rick Caruso? And if it's obviously Rick Caruso, then why is she still mayor? Why isn't she being held accountable right now? Why aren't they kicking her out and getting someone in who understands reconstruction, for example?
Who are you planning on having her kick out? I mean, listen, there's going to be an election or there's going to be some sort of recall.
Yeah.
If that's the case, then she'll be recalled.
Yeah.
People agree or don't agree. But I mean, I think right now people are a little too concerned about saving their lives and saving their houses to worry about recalling Karen Bass at the moment.
I don't agree.
I will say to you that...
Yeah, but Julie, I don't agree with that. I mean, I had Dennis Quaid on yesterday. He knows 100 people who've lost their homes. He wants a recall immediately. You think she literally disappeared?
Fine, then he should get the signatures, circulate the petitions to get a recall. That's not a problem. I mean, listen, the beauty of living in this country is there are mechanisms with which to do that if you so choose.
Yeah.
I would say to you, however, the larger issue here is that California is not the only state that deals with natural disasters, and Republicans will not be in charge forever. What goes around comes around, and I would be very, very wary of throwing out these kinds of contingencies because one day Donald Trump will not be president, one day Mike Johnson will not be speaker, one day there will be Democrats in both those offices, and one day Louisiana, Mike Johnson's home state, or Florida, Donald Trump's home state, probably sooner rather than later, is going to have a horrible natural disaster. And on that day, when that happens,
but we have them, and we have
plenty of
of course. Have you met Ron DeSantis?
Plenty of Democrats. This happens all the time. Listen, I'm from New York, and I recall very clearly when Ted Cruz would not vote for Hurricane Sandy relief, and then years later, all of a sudden, this horrible situation in Texas happened, and he came crawling hat in hand to New York senators and to New York members of Congress, begging them for money for Texas. So if you want to go down this road, feel free. If you want to take advantage of people's natural disasters, feel free. But the reality is, when that happens to you, expect that what goes around comes around.
All right, Wajaha.
Yeah, real quick. California is my home state. It is the 5th largest economy in the world, the most populous state in the country, 40 million people. Currently suffering from one of the most devastating fires. Over 100,000 people have been displaced. You know what's free? Compassion. You know what's free? Decency. You know what's free? Empathy. The United States of America can afford that. The President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, at the very least, he can do that. Don't be cruel. Don't promote misinformation. Don't promote an AI-generated image of Los Angeles on fire and replacing Hollywood with Trump was right. You know what you also agree on? Is climate change, which is here, which will exist after Republicans and Democrats. And if I take the logic of Michael and Dave and cruel MAGA folks, then Ted Cruz should not have gone to Cancun while his state was freezing. These dumbass Republicans in Texas, this is for everyone watching around the world. For the sake of politics, not for the sake of money, not for the sake of national security, they are off the national grid.
All right. All right, see you.